Listen, I know that I would like to have these videos between 5 to 10 minutes, and so far this week, not been doing that. My argument to myself is that this is foundation, and I need you to have a clear and concise understanding of where we're going to jump off in the Italian Renaissance. This is just my way of being hostile and apologizing to you for these long videos. Anyways, we've looked at Italy. Great job, Italy. Let's go up now and look at what's happening in the Renaissance in northern territories. Notice how I'm not saying northern Renaissance. So we're going to be looking at a few artists. The first lives in Nuremberg. Nuremberg, which at this time is a hotbed of intellectual and artistic energy and centered around this guy, Albrecht Dürer. Now, Albrecht Dürer, he is an extremely interesting figure. I didn't like him at first. I'll explain why. But since reading more about him, I'm like, yeah, you cool. You cool. All right, cool, cool, cool. So what is this? This is our next artwork. This is Albrecht Dürer's self-portrait, and it was made in 1500. Now, we know exactly who this is and when it was made because in addition to seeing Albrecht Dürer, we also see, he dated it, 1500. And then the A and the D, that's his signature, Albrecht Dürer. Neat. Over here, that's some Latin. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it later. Now, the characteristic that immediately stood out to me, and one of the reasons I did not like this guy at first, I was like, dude looks like Jesus. Why is he trying to be like Jesus? It is really what he looked like. Brown hair, curly with a beard. I mean, some of you guys are having quarantine beards right now. Maybe you can be inspired by Albrecht Dürer. Here, this is a painting he did of himself 2 years before. And this was during a tour of Italy. So as a young man, his dad was a goldsmith and a metal worker. So he trained as a goldsmith and is very comfortable with engraving and the artifice or the artistry of metal. This comes into play with our next artwork by him. But from there, he went on to learn about painting and sculpture and architecture. He had an apprenticeship kind of overarching education, and he was always interested in learning new things, not just for art, but also in science and other forms of technology. And he traveled around Europe. He went into northern Italy, and during his time in northern Italy, he painted this of himself. If we were alive in 1498, we would immediately see that this boy, I think he was, where is my notes? He was 26 at the time. This boy here, he is dressed like an Italian. Just by his costume, his braided cord right there, his hat, even his posture that he's sitting in, this is all so Italian Renaissance. Well, it makes sense, right? He's traveling around in Italy, and he's fascinated by the talented Italian Renaissance artists. So he's sitting in this pose. We call it three-quarter pose. I'm not going to test you on that, but it's something that we see in a lot of Italian portraiture. His costume, Italian. And then you see behind him, he has that window with that gorgeous landscape and then atmospheric perspective. All of that, the window, the atmospheric perspective, that's so Italian. So he is trying to be not from Nuremberg. This kind of identity crisis, we all go through it, but he's going to return to Nuremberg 2 years later and paint this portrait. Now, just before we get to focusing on this, I just want a little joke here. Let me move out of the way. When you got that clavicle popping, clavicle bone right there. All right, now, I told you that Albrecht Dürer had a signature, an A and a D, and he's dated it right here. What we also see is in Latin, it's written here, Albrecht Dürer of Nuremberg made an image of myself in appropriate colors in my 28th year. Yeah, it's not very fancy of wordplay or anything like that, but it is significant in our understanding of Albrecht Dürer. First of all, he is from a Germanic country, and the native tongue of Germany would be not Latin. What is this dude doing writing in Latin? It's Renaissance now, okay? Latin is the language that the ancient Romans spoke. At this time in the Renaissance, Latin is still taught, and it is only taught to those of an higher or upper education. Basically, if you went to college at this time, you would know how to read and write Latin. So what is Albrecht Dürer saying about himself that he's written, Albrecht Dürer of Nuremberg made an image of myself in appropriate colors in my 28th year, in Latin, and not his native Germanic tongue? This is the time when I'd be in class and I'd be like, waiting, why do you think he wrote that? What? Yes, exactly, because he's trying to show how smart he is. If this language, the Latin language, is of the educated class, he's saying, yeah, I'm well educated. I know how to read and write Latin, and I'll do it in my painting. Okay, cool. What else is he doing in this? Well, he's remarkably not Italian. Gone is the three-quarter pose. Gone is that landscape in the background. And even his costume. This is not Italian. What he's wearing here is very Germanic. He has a brown wool jacket lined in brown fur. There are some very elegant details here. He's got this black velvet ribbon that cuts at the sleeves, and it reveals his undershirt underneath. He's got his gorgeous hair, which, so many of us would just die for, right? I mean, unfortunate bangs at the top. I don't know what's going on there. But what we're looking at here is a very Germanic costume. His forward-facing stance is also something that we see in a lot of German portraiture. So maybe this identity crisis of exploring around Italy, he's come back to Nuremberg, he's 28 years old, he's kind of figuring himself out, and he's making this self-portrait as a way of reflection, reflecting upon himself. Okay, cool. Now let me tell you a little bit more about this costume and what he's trying to say about himself. Yes, he's highly educated. He knows how to read and write Latin, which is what all the smart guys know how to do. He's also got on this jacket here. And at the time, it was common to have detachable sleeves for your jackets. What do I mean by that? Your sleeves would, hold on one moment. Let me just get rid of some of these things. Sorry. No, Siri, I was trying to turn off my notifications. So, the sleeves, they would be here and they would attach to a main vest. Now, this was typical because you could be more versatile. I told you, fabric's really expensive. So maybe instead of having 10 jackets, you just have various sleeves and vests, and then you can intermix them all. Here, we see the sleeve and the vest, and then revealing behind that, we have some of his undershirt. And these undershirts would be worn by everybody, but if you want to show off your wealth, you're going to get more fancy undershirts and then poke them through at your sides. These kinds of decorations were called slashes, like slash of fabric, and then you'd pull out your undershirt. So he's got this slashed fabric with a pleated undershirt. That's fancy. It's a very fancy jacket he's got on. Also, it's lined in fur. Now, at this time, there were things called sumptuary laws. Sumptuary laws were laws that defined who could wear what kind of luxury goods could you afford, could you own based on your social status. This might sound ridiculous to have like dress codes in the form of laws, but Really, a peasant could not dress above their station, just as much as a noble could not dress below their station. The reason being, how am I going to treat you if I don't know what kind of status you have? At this time, you had different rights based on your status in this cultural hierarchy. So I treat you like a peasant because you dress like a peasant. Don't go around and surprise me and be a nobleman. Same way, I treat you like a nobleman because you're dressed like a nobleman. Don't go around and actually be a lowly peasant. So how does that relate to Albrecht Dürer? He's got his fur here. There were laws about how much fur one could wear based on their status. More fur, more status. Fur is very expensive. It still is today. So he is showing off his higher status with that fur-lined jacket. He's saying, I'm of a higher status. I know Latin. He's also making a claim to his talent. Now look at how he looks at us. Look at these intense eyes. I want you to imagine that you're sitting on the other side of a table from this dude. What kind of a guy is he? Just give me some quick snap judgments. I know you judge people by the way they look. So tell me, you see this guy sitting across a table from you. What are some words you would describe his personality, his behavior? Oftentimes students will say intense. Yeah, intense. Where do you see that intensity? It's in the eyes. Look at how he's just unblinkingly looking at us. Intelligent, observant, always thinking, precise. Absolutely. These are the kinds of words that he wants you to associate with him. If we look at this gesture here, he seems to be playing with that fur, right? That tactile, beautiful fur that he's kind of rolling his finger over. But it's also a finger or a hand in the kind of shape of blessing. This hand position is often something we see Jesus in when he's giving a blessing. Miss Cortez, are you telling me that he thinks he's Jesus? This is why I did not like him before, okay? I thought the same thing. I thought, ew, dude looks like Jesus and he's blessing himself? No. What he's actually saying is that this talent of creating this painting is a blessing from God. God has blessed me with this talent. In fact, his hands. The painter needs his hands and needs to see. So he's highlighting those eyes. He's highlighting his hands. His tools are his mind, his eyes, and his fingers. And these are blessings from God. This goes back to my definition of the High Renaissance when I said that it's the rise in the status of the artist. Albrecht Dürer, he is making that argument. He's saying, I'm not just a craftsman. It requires a lot of education to do what I do. It requires a God-given talent to do what I do. Whew. It sounds like an egomaniac, I know. The reason I changed my opinion on Albrecht Dürer is because I also found out that while he does look like Jesus and he thinks this is a God-given talent, he also employed his mom and his wife in his business. This might not sound like a big deal, but at the time, women were seen as property and intellectually inferior to men. So the fact that he hired his mom to be kind of like his agent, like the businesswoman, right, in charge of his commissions, and his wife was also part of his kind of like his producer. She would be there to organize and keep track of all of his doings in his business. The fact that he allowed or encouraged or promoted the idea that women could do other things besides make babies I appreciate him for that. All right, we're going to stop here and we're going to look at our next artwork by Durer in the next video.